Good morning. It is 8:38 a.m. on Sunday, October 8th, 2017. Shoot, I was trying to get through that before I sneezed. If this was a professional video of any kind, I would probably just start that over. But, well, where was I? I'm Christiana Ellis, and I just got up. This is 5 more minutes. Today is Sunday, so we are continuing our rewatch of Avatar: The Last Airbender, but we are closing in on the big finale today. We're going to talk about episode 19 of season 3, which is part 2 of the finale. So, Sozin's Comet, part 2, The Old Masters. So, if you recall, last week we left off with Aang's primary dilemma here being the fact that it is kind of just expected that he's gonna have to kill Ozai to defeat him. Everyone else is kind of just assuming that that's, well, what else are you gonna do? Like, what else could you possibly do with him? And Aang doesn't have an answer for that, except that just for his own moral center, that feels wrong to kill anybody, to take a life on purpose. And so he was meditating on that quandary when a strange island appeared and Aang disappeared as far as the rest were concerned. So we pick up this time with the rest of the party has gone in search of a way to find Aang. And so they tracked down June, the bounty hunter, with her Shirshu, which is like a giant star-nosed mole that has magical smelling abilities, to try to track down Aang. And she, unfortunately, informs them that according to her Shirshu's smelling, he's gone. He is not just missing, it's like he doesn't exist. And that doesn't mean he's dead, because if he was dead, they could find his body. But it's like he doesn't exist. And so we're all left going, wait, what? What does that mean? And so, sure enough, we follow Aang, who does exist somewhere on this island. And so he's trying to figure out himself where he might be. He says, well, if he shouldn't be in the spirit world because bending doesn't work in the spirit world, and he has his bending, so what could it be? He's got to try to look around. And as he finds sort of a real symbol on the ground, seems like an obvious mystical place of some importance, so he decides to commune with his past avatar selves to try to get some advice on, well, what do I do here? I'm troubled by this quandary. And so first he contacts Avatar Roku, who is the firebender who was the immediately preceding Avatar, and asks him the question. And Roku talks about how his hesitation, his restraint in dealing with Sozin back in his day, he potentially could have stopped the war if he had acted sooner, instead of just hoping that Sozin would change his mind. And so that is his regret. And so his advice to Aang is that you must be decisive, which is not necessarily precisely a question of you should kill him, but is certainly a question of you need to choose a course of action and then pursue it. You can't stay wishy-washy to the end. And that, is not reassuring to Aang, because, again, it feels a little bit like, well, that seems like you're telling me that I do have to do it. And so he decides, you know what, I don't like that advice. I'm going to call upon Avatar Kyoshi, who was the earth bending avatar from before Roku, and she talks about the story of Qin the Conqueror. And it's interesting getting sort of flashback on lots of these, older episodes and, learning, because we remember there was the town that hated Avatar Kyoshi because they believed she murdered their leader and so on. And then we eventually heard the story and how it was she defeated this one ruler who was actually, too stubborn. And so Aang tries to get around this idea that, like, well, you didn't technically kill him. He died because he was too stubborn to get out of the way. But she kind of calls him on that and says, well, yeah, but still technically he died as a result of the thing that I did. He potentially could have saved himself, but she says, I don't see the distinction. And it's was necessary to keep the world in balance, she says. And so her advice is, the wisdom she brings him is that only justice will bring peace. And so Aang, at this point, is frustrated because twice now he's kind of been given advice that he feels like is telling him to do what he feels is instinctively feels is wrong. And so he actually says, I shouldn't have ever asked Kyoshi, and it's almost like he's like, well, I know she would have said that, but he's at this point just frustrated because we can see that he is still struggling, right? Like, he's asking for advice, but the advice he's getting still feels instinctively wrong to him. And so he's just basically going to keep asking more and more people, hoping for someone to like, no matter how many of his avatars tell him he should do it, like, we can imagine that if even one of them told him he shouldn't, he would listen to them over the ones that told him he should. But it's also true that they're not precisely saying murder him as much as they're saying, you need to do something. You can't, this, and so it's tricky. So the next he, consults, an avatar from the waterbending tribe, and let's see, where was this? And this is Avatar Kuruk. And Kuruk talks about how he tended to be a less active avatar. He kind of assumed that keeping the balance would work by letting people do what they were going to do and not necessarily intervening, just letting things play out, going with the flow, so to speak. But we have another revisiting of an old bad guy, Ko the Face Stealer, an evil spirit, punished Kuruk for his laziness by taking his wife. And so Kuruk feels that he, should have been more proactive. And so that's what he tells Aang, which is essentially that you need to, and again, it's like he doesn't precisely say you must murder him, but what he does say is, like, you can't just let things play out. You have to shape your own destiny. And I think that one definitely resonates for Aang, because he is kind of, go with the flow does sort of come naturally to him. And the idea that, he has had trouble with avoiding things in the past, right? We're running away. That's why he got frozen for 100 years, is because he ran away. And so Kuruk is telling him here, no, you have to do something. You have to make a decision, choose, and make a call to decide the fate. Because you can't just, if you just let things play out, there's no guarantee that it'll work out. And in fact, it will probably not work out the way you want, because there are forces attempting to shape it in the other way. And so you have to counteract those. So, last but not least, Aang says, well, it's my air nomad upbringing that has taught me to feel this way about every life being sacred. So, um, let me consult an air nomad avatar, and hopefully they'll bear out what I've been feeling. And so he summons uh, Avatar Yang Chen to ask for more wisdom. And we can tell that he's sort of feeling like if anyone gets it, she'll get it. But Yang Chen says that while the air nomads talk about achieving enlightenment through severing attachment to the world, the avatar can't do that because the avatar has a special duty to the world beyond the individual's own, feelings about it. And that to sever his connection to the world in order to achieve personal enlightenment is a shirking of the responsibility that the avatar holds. And so she suggests that the price he may have to pay is a violation of his own moral code. He may have to sacrifice his own feelings in order to save the world. And, it's interesting because it ties in a little bit to, and so now 4 for 4 have essentially seemed to suggest to him that he can't avoid this. And that, still none of them specifically saying you have to kill him, but they do say you have to do whatever it takes. And so the idea is essentially that as much as you want there to be another way, unless you know what that is, you still have to do what it takes. And so Aang is very frustrated there. But we can also remember the guru that taught him all about chi and the different chi points that the I think they were called chakras in the show that he had to unlock, and the one that had been blocked since he was struck by lightning, preventing him from entering the avatar state. And we remember that part of that teaching was to sever his connection to the world. And we recall that the one that he struggled the most with was the idea of letting go of his attachment to Katara. And so it's interesting just to recall that because it does conflict a little bit with some of what the avatars are telling him. So, or maybe not conflict, but rather he does not understand yet how they might go together. And so, unfortunately, Aang has consulted the wisdom, and unfortunately for him, they are all telling him essentially the same thing, that you're going to have to do something. And if you don't have a plan, you can't just go into this hoping to have some other plan present itself. You have to go in and be decisive. You have to bring the world justice. You have to shape your own destiny. And you have to be prepared to do whatever it takes, even if that means sacrificing your own moral principles. Because you have a larger duty. And while you could say all life is sacred and it is a sin to kill a person, the world needs that to happen. And so he's in a tough spot, and he's still obviously very troubled by all this. But, so as we have him, really struggling with this still, because he was not told what he was hoping to hear, which was, he was hoping someone was going to give him a new answer and say, nope, here's, you're all set. You give him an alternative plan. But he sleeps then, and in the morning he wakes up and he figures out that the island is actually moving closer to this mountainous landscape. And then by diving into the water, he realizes that the whole island is actually an enormous animal. He swims around front and eventually is able to, we get the great shot of this huge eye opening behind him. And then it surfaces and we see it, and then it is an enormous lion turtle, which is clearly a very highly magical creature of some kind. It would have to be already just to do the things that we've seen. I mean, be as big as it is, but also to have summoned Aang in some way and to make it seem as though he doesn't exist while he's there. And so he swims around and he's talking to this lion turtle. And what the lion turtle says when asked for its own wisdom, here's the quote: "The true mind can weather all the lies and illusions without being lost. The true heart can tough the poison of hatred without being harmed. Since beginningless time, darkness thrives in the void, but always yields to purifying light." And it feels comforting. Like, again, we don't have any like concrete answer, but this feels better to Aang, and the lion turtle reaches out with its claw and some sort of light, it touches Aang in the head and in the heart, and there's this purifying light. And so we don't know exactly what that means because we don't have any more follow-up in this episode, but we get a little bit after the 4 previous avatars are all giving Aang wisdom that kind of says, do what you need to do. The lion turtle somehow feels a little bit more like, but maybe there is still hope of another way. But we don't know what it is, so we'll have to see. But, that's Aang's storyline. And so now let's, rewind back to the beginning of the episode where we follow the rest of the team here and what they're doing now that Aang has disappeared on them. With June essentially telling them it is essentially pointless to even try to continue looking for Aang at this point, because wherever he is beyond the ability of, mortal creatures to find him. So instead, Zuko suggests, well, the only other person I can think of who might even be able to get close to killing Ozai is Iroh, who we still haven't seen since the escape. And so they use June's Shirshu to find him. They track the scent all the way to the collapsed walls of Ba Sing Se. And they camp out for the night but are awakened with a fire surrounding them. And we see now, for the first time in their White Lotus uniforms, we see 4 returning characters. We see Bumi, the king of Omashu that was Aang's friend, and the crazy old but super strong earthbender. We see Paku, who was the waterbending master at the northern water tribe, the one that initially was very dismissive of Katara, and very sort of prissy, but we eventually learned was, had been in love with Katara and Sokka's gran. And so there was a reconciliation with him by the end of that whole little arc, even though it started kind of prickly. We see Zhang Zhang, who was the renegade firebender who was the first to attempt to try to teach Aang firebending. And we see Master Pian Dao, who was the one that taught Sokka all about the way of the sword and all of that stuff. And so those are all certainly friendly faces for our gang to find, and we discover now that they're actually also all members of this Order of the White Lotus. That has, we've we've been made aware that that is an organization, but we're seeing even more of them now. And the the idea that they have been sort of trying to work behind the scenes all this time. And they say they can take everyone to see Ira. We get some, nice greetings, reminding everybody kind of who's who. Um, Boomy is ridiculous as always in terms of saying, "Oh, someone's missing from your group. Where is Momo?" And then he's reassured that, "Oh, well, if Momo and Aang are together, then we don't need to worry." And then we get confirmation that Paku and Gran Gran have apparently become betrothed again. And so we have some fun with Sokka deciding, should we call you Gramp Gramp or perhaps Grampaku? And Paku is not a fan of any of those. And so we have, let's see, let's see. I'm just scanning through to make sure I don't miss any significant points. We discover that Bumi escaped from the Fire Nation and re-liberated the city of Omashu on the day of the eclipse. We remember that once he had been captured, there was the moment where Aang was trying to rescue him, and he said he didn't want to be rescued. He was waiting for a moment. And that was, an important earth lesson or earth-bending lesson for Aang, was this idea of patience and waiting for the right moment instead of just trying to act right away, no matter what the circumstance. And so, sure enough, was enormously powerful. And on the day of the eclipse, when the firebenders didn't have any bending, he single-handedly rescued the whole city and expelled all of the firebenders, which is pretty exciting. And we get some nice epic earthbending montage as he does that, and also a nice funny bit where he just talks to Zuko and Sokka and says, "So, did you guys do anything interesting on the day of the eclipse?" And they're like, "No, not really." So obviously that's kind of silly. Um, and so as they reach the White Lotus camp, they basically just point at a tent and say, "Yep, that's Iroh's tent. That's where he is." But this is a moment of crisis for Zuko, right? Because he has not seen his uncle since their last conversation, where he was angry and still, on the wrong side, and he's just like, "How can I face him? I betrayed everything that he tried to teach me." And I can't, what if he still hates me? And it's this moment of fear. But Katara reassures him, telling him that, he's going to be proud of you because you're doing the right thing now. And Zuko is still not completely sure. But he goes in and he finds Iroh asleep. And instead of waking him, he just kneels by his bed and waits until morning. And in the morning, we have one of the emotional climaxes of the whole series, which is Zuko just in tears, apologizing and begging forgiveness from his uncle, who just immediately hugs him, also crying. And it's, just saying, I was never angry. I was sad because I thought you had lost your way, but now they're back. And it's like, oh my God, I'm tearing up just now thinking about it. One of the things in this rewatch, the relationship between Iroh and Zuko, was always important even when I watched it the first time. But, knowing where it went during this rewatch and having the scope of that be apparent, watching from the beginning and seeing all the seeds planted early on in the series, it's it's really it's very moving. Zuko has just this amazing redemption tale, right? And it's not like a straight line, and it's complex and it's interesting. And we have Iroh, who's just been watching him all along, hoping for him to be able to come to the right side on his own without being forced, because he can't force that or else it won't be real. Oh, but now they're hugging and it's so beautiful. Anyway, so now, though, we have the rest of the team having found Iroh. The hope was, well, Iroh can fight Ozai. But Iroh says, it can't be me, because even if I did defeat him, and I'm not sure that I could, if I did, it would just seem like power squabbling within the Fire Nation. And the world would not learn the right lesson from this. There would just still be fear that the Fire Nation was still going to be a threat, even if it backed away from the war. There would still be this tension and this fear in the world. It wouldn't be the right lesson. The only way the world can actually heal is if the Avatar ends the war, restoring balance to the world. And, I think probably the pragmatic folks within the team, like Sokka, are probably still kind of thinking, well, yeah, but shouldn't we have like a plan B? But, the Iroh is very kind of firm in this. And then not only that, but he also feels that once Ozai is defeated, he does not want to be the new Fire Lord to take Ozai's place. And he thinks it needs to be a new person. And he suggests that it should be Zuko, and says that he has, unquestionable honor. And Zuko, is reluctant to accept that compliment because he's made so many mistakes. But Iroh just says, no, you were on a journey and you have come to your place honestly, and now it's unquestionable. And so he suggests that Zuko should be, so they all have to make a plan. They have to hope that the Avatar's destiny will be to fight Ozai, and that will happen. And if they can't find him on their own now, they all have to try to say, okay, well, we have to have faith that that part is going to work out. And so what should we do in the meantime? And so Zuko is going to go to the Fire Nation capital and confront Azula. And Katara is going to come with him because Azula is very powerful. It's not obvious that Zuko could defeat her alone. So Katara is going to help. And so they're going to try to be there in place to guide the Fire Nation forces once Ozai is eliminated. And this airship fleet that the Fire Nation has is still a military force with or without Ozai. And so we're going to have Toph and Sokka and Suki take Appa to go try to deal with that. So, yep. Well, actually, no, I take it back. Zuko and Katara take Appa, and Sokka, Suki, and Toph ride on an eel hound, which is sort of a weird big lizard thing that's supposedly very fast. And then there's just a discussion of like, well, and so Iroh, what would you do after all of this happens? And Iroh says he just wants to reopen his tea shop and play Pie Show every day, which is fun. And so that's where we leave this episode, where we've kind of got all of our pieces still on the board, and moving to their places for the final confrontation. And I think we have upped the spiritual stakes for Aang, but we still don't precisely have an answer for how to deal with Ozai. But everyone else is kind of getting into place, and there's just this recognition that whatever happens with Ozai, It's Aang's responsibility. It's his deal. Nobody else can do it for him. No one else really seems to even be able to help him. He is the avatar. This is his duty, his responsibility. He's going to have to figure it out one way or another. Meanwhile, everyone else is going to help him in the ways they can by dealing with all of this peripheral threats. But we're shaping up to this huge epic conclusion battle, and it's amazing. So, there we have it. Next time, we'll be talking about Sozin's Comet Part 3, Into the Inferno. And that is one of only 2 episodes remaining. So I'll talk to you next week about that episode, and I'll talk to you tomorrow for 5 more minutes.